to the World War II newspaper channel where we read the Chicago Tribune one day at a time, going through World War II as it happened through the eyes of those who lived it. If you enjoy content like this, please subscribe to this channel and click on the bell icon to get notifications when a new upload is going to premiere. And also, if you want to hear the actual newsmakers, go check out my other channel, the companion channel to this one, the World War II Old Time Radio channel. There we have vintage broadcasts, including newscasts, speeches, old movies, and music. And subscribe to that channel and click on the bell icon. Now for the newspaper. News as read from the Chicago Tribune for Monday, December 30th, 1940. Henry Chapter reporting. The weather today. The sun rose at 7:18 a.m. It set at 4:28 p.m. For Chicago and vicinity, cloudy Monday and Tuesday, probably followed by rain Tuesday night. Not much change in temperature, moderate northwest and north winds on Monday. The low temperature, 30 degrees. The high temperature, 39. Today's headline, FDR lashes Axis powers. Washington, D.C., December 29th. President Roosevelt tonight expressed his determination to give all possible material support to Great Britain, even at the risk of war for the United States. He defied any combination of dictators to interfere with his course by threats of what they might do about it. In a White House fireside chat broadcast over 500 American radio stations and throughout the world by shortwave transmission, Mr. Roosevelt called for a war to the finish against Nazi Germany. He dismissed as nonsense the demands of the congressional non-interventionists that this government explore the possibility of a negotiated peace before underwriting a British victory at the possible cost of military intervention by the United States. There can be no appeasement, the president said, of ruthlessness. You cannot negotiate with a gang of outlaws, he explained. His denunciation of Nazism in particular and aggressor nations generally was equally belligerent in tone throughout the 40-minute address. Mr. Roosevelt's speech was written, it was learned tonight, with the assistance of Robert E. Sherwood, one of the policymakers of William Allen White's Committee to Defend America by Aiding the Allies. Sherwood, a playwright and author of Idiot's Delight, is one of the most bellicose interventionists in the United States. He was one of the first to issue a public demand for a declaration of war against Germany. Sherwood arrived in Washington yesterday and was a White House guest until his departure for New York tonight. He was one of the 170 interventionists who signed a petition which the White House released with implied approval, urging Mr. Roosevelt to commit this country to a policy of doing everything that may be required to assure defeat of the Axis powers. A petition addressed to the president by the No Foreign War Committee and signed by 11,690 everyday Americans urging him to remember his campaign pledges and keep this country out of war was not made public by the White House, but the president scornfully answered this and similar appeals in his speech tonight. Peace petitions, Mr. Roosevelt declared, express the attitude of a small minority who want to see no evil and hear no evil, even though they know in their hearts that evil exists. The president's admission of the risk of war involved in his course of greatly increasing aid to Great Britain was implied in his statement that, if we are completely honest with ourselves, we must admit there is risk in any course we take. But the president insisted that the course be proposed involves the least risk of getting into war. What the nations defending themselves against attack require, the president declared, are planes, tanks, guns, and freighters. He declared that there is no demand for the sending of an American expeditionary force abroad and that any statement to the contrary can be dismissed as a deliberate untruth. The president did not say whether the greatly increased aid he pledged for Great Britain would include the transfer of more destroyers from the American fleet or the use of American warships to convoy munitions and other supplies through the war zones. Willard, Ohio, December 29th. Vern Marshall, chairman of the No Foreign War Committee, commenting on President Roosevelt's speech, said here tonight that the president's speech concerning the real cause of Europe's interminable war gave us none of the truths concerning its economic, political, and ideological causes. The president indulged in a bomber flight to Denver this time. He will not be condemned for it, as was Orson Welles for bringing to the eastern seaboard an imaginary enemy from Mars. But even so, the people of Denver need not feel serious alarm. Hitler hasn't crossed the English Channel yet, and it's still only 23 miles wide. Washington, D.C., December 29th. Non-interventionist leaders in Congress describe President Roosevelt's radio address tonight as the most warlike he has uttered thus far. Senator Burton K. Wheeler, Democrat Montana, said the speech practically amounted to a declaration of war. The non-interventionists generally deplored the president's depreciation of all effort to ascertain a possible basis for a negotiated peace. His position, they declared, commits this country to the support of Great Britain in a war to the finish, even if it means military intervention by the United States. The non-interventionists also said the president failed to tell the American people the facts of the National Defense Program and the reasons for its lack of progress. While approving his program of aiding Great Britain, they insisted that the defenses of this country must be denuded if the danger is as great as the president says it is. Senator Wheeler said he thought it was beneath the dignity of the president to attempt to intimidate all those who disagree with him by intimating that they are fifth columnists or agents of foreign powers. Senator Pat McCarran, Democrat Nevada, said, "I regret that President Roosevelt did not tell the people explicitly and clearly what we are doing for our national defense and why it has not gone forward with greater celerity. I regret also that the president didn't say the United States is not now in the European war and is not going into that war. Those two statements would have given great consolation to the American people." New York, December 30th. The British Broadcasting Corporation was reported today by the Columbia Broadcasting System to be broadcasting frequent 15-minute German-language summaries of President Roosevelt's speech last night. San Francisco, California, December 29th. Senator Hiram W. Johnson departed today for Washington, D.C. and the opening of the 77th Congress with the remark that he was off to the wars. The president said he hates war, so maybe he won't get in it, said the Republican legislator and veteran isolationist. Of course, he's only going to have an army of 4 million men. Maybe he'll send them down to Tierra del Fuego. Johnson will start his fifth term as senator when Congress convenes on January 6th. New York, December 29th. The Columbia Broadcasting System asserted here tonight that the only formal request for time on the air that it has received from Vern Marshall was one that it had received by mail today. Columbia issued the statement in reply to a charge by Marshall that Columbia had denied him time to answer an attack made on him by Herbert Agar, interventionist editor over CBS facilities on Saturday night. Actually, that was Sunday. They were wrong on that. You can hear that on my other channel, the World War II Old Time Radio channel. The only formal application for time made by Vern Marshall was received today by the Columbia Broadcasting System. An official of the company announced it will be given the usual consideration. Cedar Rapids, Iowa, December 29th. The No Foreign War Committee sent a telegram to President Roosevelt today informing him that a total of 11,690 citizens had authorized use of their names as signatures to the committee's anti-war petition. The petition sent to the White House yesterday stated that everyday Americans wanted no part of Europe's perpetual war. The signatures included 5,741 received up to midnight last night and 5,949 received since then. Vern Marshall, chairman of the No Foreign War Committee, in a radio speech in Chicago yesterday, renewed his plea that America stay out of Europe's war and warned Americans against what he termed the Frankenstein of democracy, a radio monopoly. Mr. Marshall, editor of the Cedar Rapids, Iowa Gazette, was in Chicago on his way to Washington. He spoke over WGN after he said he had been denied time on the Columbia Broadcasting System to answer Herbert Agar of Louisville, Kentucky, spokesman for the interventionist William Allen White Committee to defend America by aiding the Allies. Agar made an address Sunday night over a Columbia network urging that telegrams be sent to the president asking help for Great Britain. To his radio audience, Marshall addressed a fiery speech asking his listeners to send telegrams to President Roosevelt, telling him you don't want him to take this country into another foreign war or give away its defenses. Marshall charged that the current war is one in which the lives of men, women, and children are the pawns of governments which never yet have fought a great international war in Europe on which democracy hinged. He listed his committee's aims as follows: to prevent this country from being sucked into another economic war in Europe on the excuse and alibi that it is a war to save democracy, to prevent the government of this country from having its defenses given away by a president who the other day said he proposed to do away with the silly dollar sign in consideration of aid to Britain. We are always asked to save Europe when it gets into one of its wars or into a new chapter of the same old war, Marshall continued. How can the people of America be misled in 1940 and 1941 again as they were in 1916, 17, and 18? They called us Uncle Shylock when, after the war, we suggested that perhaps the taxpayers of America should not be called to finance in the billions a war begun in Europe and conceived in Europe and to which this country made no contribution as to cause. And we were called Uncle Shylock because we thought that the allies to whom we had loaned billions should pay for their own wars if we won them. And now for world news. Sofia, Bulgaria, December 29th. The advance guard of part of the Great German Expeditionary Force, now fanning out in southeastern Europe, reached the Bulgarian frontier today. Bulgars in anxious tension wondered where and how far it would spread. Bulgaria is a potential avenue to Greece or Turkey or the Russian-dominated Black Sea. Informed quarters said Bulgaria was likely to permit passage of German troops under protest, recognizing the futility of armed resistance. Frontier District reports said fresh Nazi troops could be seen taking up positions, occupying barracks, and arraying equipment at Giurgiu on the Romanian side of the border across the ice-blocked Danube from Ruszczuk. Churning masses of ice in the Danube, some observers thought may hold the Germans in check for a time, even if the Berlin High Command plans to send them into Bulgaria. The situation in Bulgaria grew tense. King Boris conferred with Premier Bogdan Filov as political circles speculated on the possibility that German pressure would produce a government crisis. Budapest, Hungary, December 29th. Estimates of the number of German troops moving across Hungary rose from the original 300,000 to 600,000 today as reports indicated that at least some of them might remain in Hungary. The bulk of them were bound for Romania. Hungary's Minister of Agriculture, Michael Telecki, resigned today because it was reported he differed with the government over the mass movement of German troops through Hungary. Reports trickling through the Romanian censorship indicated that most of the Germans moved directly into camps and barracks previously prepared in western Romania between Arad and Timisoara near the Yugoslav frontier and along the southern Romanian border between Giurgiu and the Black Sea opposite Bulgaria. Belgrade, Yugoslavia, December 29th. The Belgrade newspaper Vermi, mouthpiece of the Yugoslav Foreign Office, commenting today on the entrance of fresh German troops into Romania, said the reinforcements which German garrisons in Romania are receiving these days will be used, it seems, rather to consolidate the present order in the Danubian region than for operations south of Romania. Athens, December 29th. Greek forces were reported today to have edged closer to Valona, their next goal, by threatening Italian control at 3 points guarding the approaches to that southern Albanian port. Action continues slow because of heavy snow, which has piled up to depths of 6 feet in some parts of the northern front. A strong north wind has made the weather bitterly cold for 2 days. At Tepelini, Greek machine guns were trained on the road leading to Italian bases to the northwest. Tepelini is a junction of 2 roads leading to Valona. The Italians still hold some heights in the Tepelini sector, despite the threat that their communications may be severed completely. The Greeks have claimed the capture of 200 prisoners and a large quantity of supplies in this area. Cairo, Egypt, December 29th. British guns poured shells into the Italian base town of Bardia today in continued preparation for a final attack on the fascist stronghold in northeastern Libya, 15 miles from the Egyptian border. The British said their guns met comparatively little response from the Italian garrison. While the British assembled men and material for the coming big attack, their patrols far down in the Sudan successfully harassed the Italians southwest of Kassala and east of Galabat, General Headquarters reported. Egyptian newspapers reported discovery of a large number of banknotes, especially printed for Egypt, among the material abandoned at Sidi Barrani, first important Italian-based town seized by the British when they began the African offensive early this month. The notes presumably were to be put into circulation when the Italians entered Alexandria, it was said. Other captured documents disclosed Italian plans for administering Egypt, indicating they intended to set up a former Egyptian now living in Libya as a puppet governor. After the Italians occupied Sidi Barrani in Egypt, the radio station at Bari, Italy, broadcast in Arabic an announcement that the town was thriving under the Italians with streetcars running and banks and cabarets open. Egyptians were greatly amused at the broadcast since the town before its destruction consisted of about 30 houses. New York, December 29th. An Italian radio commentator in a broadcast heard here today said the Italian resistance at Bardia has forced the much more numerous and better armed enemy forces to mark time. London, December 29th. A British cruiser attacked and chased a powerful enemy surface raider preying on a North Atlantic convoy on Christmas morning, and in the pursuit sank a German vessel believed to have been the raider's supply ship, the Admiralty disclosed today. The Nazi warship was said to have suffered at least one square hit. The cruiser, the 10,000-ton Berwick, was damaged slightly, it was acknowledged. This was the second time within a month that the Berwick bore the scars of a sea battle, and the communique disclosed for the first time that it had been transferred from Mediterranean service against Italy to convoy duty in the Atlantic. Although the Berwick lost the raider, which may have been a fast 10,000-ton German pocket battleship, it sank the German steamer Baden, an 8,024-ton vessel. The Admiralty acknowledged that one ship of the convoy was hit and received slight damage before British escort gave chase. The Berwick remains at sea as an effective unit of the British fleet despite its damage, the Admiralty said. It acknowledged there had been 5 casualties. The question of strengthening protection for convoys crossing the North Atlantic is known to have been gravely considered by Britain's sea lords because of increasing submarine attacks. But there has been nothing to suggest that first-class cruisers such as the Berwick would be used more extensively henceforth instead of auxiliary merchant cruisers and destroyers, which have had the chief roles as convoy shepherds so far. Berlin, December 29th. The efforts of German and Italian U-boats to paralyze British shipping in the Atlantic now are being supported by German surface raiders of considerable fighting strength and are continuing with redoubled force, it was disclosed today. Today's High Command communique stated that German surface units attacked a British convoy in the Atlantic, sank a 6,000-ton merchantman by gunfire and torpedoes, damaged another freighter seriously, and inflicted heavy punishment on an escorting British cruiser. Apparently, this was the same engagement which the British said took place on Christmas morning. The Germans also reported an air attack on Sunday on a British convoy about 125 miles northwest of Ireland. A bomb hit a steamer of about 9,000 tons, causing a boiler explosion and smashing one side of the vessel, which it may be assumed sank, the Germans reported. The High Command communique declared that because of the hits scored on the 8-inch gun cruiser escorting the convoy, the British vessel was compelled to break off the engagement. The Germans said their own men of war were undamaged. The account of the engagement gave the impression that the Germans employed war vessels of relatively high fighting strength, possibly 2 heavy cruisers, since the outcome of the engagement appeared to indicate a German superiority. Germany presumably has 3 heavy cruisers of the 10,000-ton Hipper class, the Hipper, Prinz Eugen, and the Seydlitz, and a 4th which was under construction at the beginning of the war and may have been completed. The heavy cruisers are regarded as a particular menace to British shipping in view of the asserted heavy losses Britain has suffered in this class of warships. Britain had 15 at the beginning of the war. London, December 30th, via transatlantic telephone. London early today fought hundreds of towering flames set by waves of German bombers. Every fireman, thousands upon thousands in the vast London area, was called out, and more thousands of volunteers joined in the battle in the debris-littered streets. Low water pressure hampered their efforts, but a rainstorm sweeping in from the German-held continent aided their efforts. Damage ran into the millions of pounds, and casualties were believed extraordinarily heavy in a pre-midnight raid that turned the horizon scarlet at dawn. At the height of the raid, launched by hundreds of attackers, ground workers toiling desperately to control the flames saw squadron after squadron of Spitfire and Hurricane fighter planes dive into the midst of the bombers under a roof of brightly illuminated clouds. The German raiders sought refuge in those clouds. One famous church designed by Sir Christopher Wren was smashed, but scores of hastily recruited messenger boys and janitors in the neighborhood dashed into the flaming structure and rescued many priceless relics just before the roof collapsed. The fires could be seen for miles, great pillars of flames that swept the clouds and illuminated the sky clashes between the attacking and defending planes. Many persons witnessed this gripping battle despite the rain of explosive bombs dropped down toward the beacon fires. New York, December 29th. Dr. A.W.S. Rosenbach, president of the American Jewish Historical Society, told the Society's annual convention tonight that the London headquarters of the Jewish Historical Society of England had been bombed by German planes. The museum records and collections were destroyed, he said. Dublin, Ireland, December 29th. A multi-engined military aircraft flew over Dublin and the eastern counties of Ireland today, 3 hours after an unidentified military plane was sighted over the Buncrana and Lough Swilly coastal forts, the Irish Department of Defense announced tonight. Anti-aircraft defenses engaged the plane flying over the forts in the north, and it flew off in a northeasterly direction, the department said. Anti-aircraft guns south of Dublin fired on the plane, and an interceptor patrol took off at once. The plane disappeared into a thick cloud before it could be identified, the statement added. Tokyo, December 30th. The War Department today announced in a review of the conflict with China during 1940 that 590,000 Chinese and 13,000 Japanese had been killed. Total fatalities since the outbreak of fighting in July 1937 were given as 1,800,000 Chinese and 100,000 Japanese. Bangkok, Thailand, December 29th. Large-scale hostilities flared again today along the French Indochina frontier, and the Thai High Command declared French forces retreated after 2 clashes. The communique said the French left arms and ammunition behind when they were forced back yesterday in the Aranyapades district. A later contingent in which large forces of Indo-Chinese troops were said to have been involved was reported to have been lasted 2 hours. Then the communique said the French again were repulsed with many casualties. An eastern Canadian port, December 29th. Sir Hugh Dowding, British Air Marshal and former Chief of the Royal Air Force Fighter Command, declared today he was hopeful of arranging standardization of American plane products so they would fit perfectly into British requirements. I am not much concerned with the details of supply, Sir Hugh said. Emphasizing his interest in standardization, he said it's not much use for them to send us over radio or other equipment, which would have to be ripped out of planes because it wouldn't work in our types. Stockholm, Sweden, December 29th. Although Major Vidkun Quisling promised the Norwegian church political independence on condition that it did not act against his Nazi-sponsored regime, dispatches from Norway state that is being made the... I'm sorry, let me try that one more time. Act against his Nazi-sponsored regime, dispatches from Norway state that is being made the target of more frequent attacks by the Quislingists. That was kind of an odd constructed sentence. You'll have to excuse me there. Some pastors are said to have been attacked, and the belief is growing that the regime is striving to put the church under state control and to use it as a propaganda agency to win support for Quisling. Uneasiness among Norwegian churchmen is reported to have increased following the appearance of an article in Quisling's official organ comparing Quisling's politics to Christ's Sermon on the Mount and demanding that pastors spread enlightenment about the new times. Sometimes when a sentence is oddly constructed, it kind of throws off my rhythm a little bit. You'll have to excuse me when that happens. And I don't edit. I just don't have the time to do it, so I read the news stories cold and I very rarely edit them. Moscow, December 29th. Pravda, Izvestia, and Red Star, respectively, the organs of the Communist Party, the government, and the Soviet Russian Army, reproduced today an article on German industry taken from the Danzig newspaper Danziger Vorposten. Raw materials are exported into Germany in greater quantities than before the war from the Soviet Union, the Far East, the Near East, and continental countries, this article stated. In the first place, we should point to supplies of oil from Romania and Russia, iron ore from Sweden, and cotton from Russia. The first Russian-German trade agreement was signed on August 20th, 1939, just before the outbreak of war, and negotiations are underway in Moscow for implementing the agreement. The volume of trade has never been made public here. Tokyo, December 29th. The French Indochina Economic Conference, which begins here tomorrow, is as vital to the welfare of Japan as anything which has occurred in recent months, officials said today. The importance of the conference lies in the rice paddies of French Indochina. The 1939 rice crop was valued at $35 million. The government declines comment on results of preliminary conferences at Hanoi, capital of the French colony, but obviously leaders hope to arrange an exchange of Japanese manufactured goods for rice needed because of Japan's drought, rubber, Indochina's second most important export, tin, iron, manganese, and ores. Madrid, Spain, December 29th. Spain today decreed the payment of pensions to widows and children of men who met death while supporting the nationalist cause in the Civil War. Poor soldiers who have children and their heirs of any slain soldier also will receive payments. The order follows another decree that took all orphans under the protection of the state, which will feed, clothe, and teach them a trade, regardless of whether the parents were nationalists or Republicans. Application of the decree has not been perfected because of Spain's impoverished condition. The government also is trying to repatriate children sent out of the country during the Civil War. 25 children sent back from France were returned to their parents today. Havana, Cuba, December 29th. Squadrons of Cuban and United States Army planes today participated in a joint commemoration of Cuba's first day of Pan American aviation. The holiday recently was created by executive decree as a means of further strengthening the spiritual and material bonds of solidarity and understanding already existing among all republics of the Western Hemisphere. 10 planes from the United States airplane carrier Ranger, now anchored at Guantanamo, flew to Havana and joined 18 Cuban planes in maneuvers over the capital. San Salvador, El Salvador, December 29th. Salvador probably will join other Latin American countries in using a United States military mission as technical advisors to her armed forces, it is reported. Uniformity of training tactics is viewed as an essential part of hemispheric defense plans. Quito, Ecuador, December 29th. Ecuador will have virtually universal military training next year, according to a decree issued by President Arroyo del Rio, reestablishing the Civil Guard, which was disbanded in 1936. The decree requires that all male citizens between the ages of 18 and 50 engage in military drill and training 4 hours every Sunday morning. Preliminary military instruction must also be given in all schools and colleges. Montevideo, Uruguay, December 29th. The Uruguayan government today set up a commission of army officers to draw plans for an air base to be constructed near fashionable Carrasco Beach. General Alfredo Campos, former chief of staff, was appointed chairman of the commission. The government last September set aside 1,000 acres and made a preliminary appropriation of about $1 million for the base. The commission also is authorized to lay out a new system of roads connecting the airdrome with the country's main network of highways. The Ministries of National Defense and Public Works were instructed to cooperate with the commission. This airbase will be the first one to be constructed in any South American country as a result of conversations begun in Washington, D.C. last June. London, December 29th. At a moment when the government is demanding increased industrial production as a prime requisite for victory, serious concern is evinced over growing labor trouble, which is attributed to activities of communists under instructions from Moscow. The decision yesterday of Glasgow tram and busmen to cease work during raid alarms may precipitate a showdown between the government and left-wing workers. For some time, these workers have been the driving force behind the movement for the People's Convention in Manchester on January 6th. Strong pressure has been brought to bear upon Herbert Morrison, Minister of Home Security, to prevent the gathering. The workers' program, as announced, demands restoration of the right to strike even in wartime. London, December 29th. Before leaving the War Office recently to become Foreign Secretary, Anthony Eden ordered 500 tons of aluminum pots and pans from Army kitchens given to the Ministry of Aircraft Production, enough to make 500 airplanes. For months past, such metal contributed by housewives has been used in fabrication of airplane parts in response to Minister of Aircraft Production Lord Beaverbrook's slogan, "Beat your saucepans into Spitfires." More than half of this aluminum has taken wings. The rest will be turned into planes by the end of January. Vichy, France, December 29th. Marshal Henri Philippe Pétain, Chief of State, urged all of France's young men today to abandon destructive individualism and learn teamwork to reconstruct their country. France, he declared, will flower again. "My dear friends," Pétain said in a radio speech for French Youth Day, "there is a symbolic juxtaposition in the severe winter which inflicts privations and suffering and the sad period our country is passing through." Vichy, France, December 29th. For the first time since the armistice, packages may be sent by relatives to French prisoners in Italy. Swiss sources report that the prisoners are receiving adequate food and satisfactory facilities, including the privilege of walking in groups. The number of prisoners held by Italy was not indicated. While the smallest camp in Germany houses several thousand prisoners, it is believed that not more than a few hundred are confined at any spot in Italy. Berlin, December 29th. Last year, Berliners were allowed to celebrate New Year's Eve on an almost normal scale, but this year the 11 p.m. curfew must be observed. The big hotels have dropped their traditional New Year's Eve parties. Restaurants will close at 11 p.m. Consequently, persons bent on celebrating will do it at home or, in some cases, in clubs which have obtained special permission to stay open beyond curfew. Fireworks are banned for New Year's Eve celebrations. The German press also states that slapstick party favors are not to be used at parties this year. In the old days, January used to be full of thrills for women. It was the month of winter sales. This year's winter sales have been banned in view of the manufacturing restrictions for ordinary goods and the concentration of all efforts in Germany on the production of war material. Washington, D.C., December 29th. Manufacturers of electric razors in Germany are enjoying a boom because of the scarcity of shaving soap, the Department of Commerce reported today. The department did not state its source of information. Every male holder of a soap rationing card is entitled to buy one 3-ounce stick of shaving soap every 4 months. Rome, December 29th. Italy set up a dictator of the dinner table today with absolute control over the appeasement of the national appetite. The man chosen by law to regulate the production and consumption, exportation, and importation of food for civilians and fighting forces alike is the Minister of Agriculture, Giuseppe Tassinari. He is 49 years old and is perhaps Italy's foremost authority on agricultural economy. The law, issued late last night, was praised today by Virginia Gaeta, editor of Il Giornale d'Italia, as one that provided a long-felt united command on the food front. The act decreed the death penalty for extreme cases of food hoarding or destruction of prime materials and agricultural products and tripled already severe penalties for violations of laws on pooling, wholesaling, and distribution of food. Madrid, December 29th. Spaniards were told today by the official Phalangist organ that they may stand on the sidelines if they wish, but they must not attempt to sow confusion in the path of the secret majority working out Spain's destiny. The warning in the newspaper Arriba followed closely the first punishment of murmurers yesterday when 2 fines of 2,000 pesetas or $180 were imposed. Arriba said the hour has come to prohibit opinions and annoyances from persons who take advantage of Spain's difficulties to grumble or spread confusing remarks about men in power or measures announced. Hey guys, if you are fascinated by the 1930s and 1940s and love this newspaper channel, maybe you would like my other channel, the World War II radio channel. There we play radio broadcasts from a specific date. I think you will enjoy that channel if you love this one, and don't forget to subscribe to it. And now back to national news. Irving S. Olds, chairman of the United States Steel Corporation, yesterday said that the nation's defense effort had not been delayed by any shortage of steel, and no such delays from that cause were expected by the industry. Present ingot capacity of the industry is about 60% larger than the peak production in 1917 during the World War and approximately 30% larger than the ingot production of 1929, he said in a year-end statement. Our hearth ingot production dropped 15 points to 80% of the capacity last week, compared with 75.5% for last year's Christmas week, the magazine Steel reported yesterday. An upturn is scheduled this week. Washington, D.C., December 28th. Paul V. McNutt, Federal Security Administrator, said today that increased activity in private industry had almost exhausted local resources of skilled labor. There is a general tightening of the labor market with the supply of available workers and a number of skilled defense occupations almost exhausted in some localities, he said in a statement. With more and more defense contracts reaching the construction stage, manufacturing centers are busier than they have been since 1929. Now, non-industrial areas also report unusual activity as the result of government construction of military camps and airports. McNutt said that machinists, tool and die makers, skilled metal workers, and aircraft and shipbuilding craftsmen were particularly scarce. The supply of semi-skilled and unskilled labor, however, is adequate in most localities, he said. New York, December 29th. 28 of the newest type fighter planes costing more than $2 million are lying at Newark, New Jersey airport, ready for shipment to Great Britain. 20 of the ships already are crated, a survey showed today, and the remaining 8 shortly will be boxed. The planes are guarded night and day. The ships, which cost $75,000 or more each, were assembled at the Brewster plants in Newark. It was said they represent the first consignment on an order of $16 million worth received 4 months ago. The Brewster Company added it is now turning out 5 of these planes every 2 days. The ships are not among the fastest type, it was said. Their top speed is 350 miles an hour, but they are heavily armored and have a high degree of maneuverability. They carry a 37mm gun and 450 caliber machine guns. New York, December 29th. The former American export liner Extorta has been commissioned as the Marine Troop Transport and its name changed to the USS Harry Lee in honor of the late Major General Harry Lee of the Marine Corps. The new transport will be able to carry about 1,100 men and has been altered considerably since her purchase by the Navy. The ship has been fireproofed. A 5-inch gun and an additional anti-aircraft guns have been mounted on the once peaceful vessel, and a degaussing apparatus to neutralize magnetic mines has been constructed along the inner side of her hull. Washington, D.C., December 29th. Savings of $2.043 billion on non-defense expenditures in the 1942 fiscal year, which is to begin next July 1st, were urged today by the National Economy League to offset part of the cost of rearming America. In the face of extraordinary defense needs, perhaps equaling the previous level of non-defense expenditures, there is no justification for a policy of folly as usual, said Ernest Engel, League chairman. Much non-defense spending is indefensible waste. The financial burden of defense should focus the attention of all thoughtful citizens on the obvious need to conserve financial resources and credit for the armament emergency. Washington, D.C., December 29th. R.J. Thomas, president of the United Automobile Workers of America, CIO, said today that the War Department's decision to award a contract for midget scout cars to the Ford Motor Company would seriously undermine the morale of labor engaged in defense work. The department overruled a protest of Sidney Hillman, a labor member of the Defense Production Board, when it announced on Saturday that a $1,387,500 order for such cars would be allowed to stand. Hillman, a CIO vice president, and other labor leaders had protested against awarding defense contracts to the Ford Motor Company because they said the labor board had declared the company guilty of unfair labor practices. They contended that defense contracts should contain certain labor safeguards, among them a clause requiring manufacturers to conform to the Wagner Act. Seattle, Washington, December 29th. Members of the Aeronautical Mechanics Union reported today that vote tabulators were recording a 3-1 ballot to ignore a trial board's recommendations for expulsion of a union official on charges of communist activity. The union's local, representing 7,000 employees of the Boeing Aircraft Company, voted yesterday following filing of various charges against more than 20 members of their examination by the union's trial board. The trial board returned verdicts declaring 2 of the officials guilty of communist activity and recommending expulsion and fines. The membership's vote was tallied yesterday, gave a majority for upholding the board in one case. The incomplete ballot count today indicated the second official had been vindicated. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, December 29th. The Allis-Chalmers Manufacturing Company, which has received orders in the last 2 months for the construction of $18 million worth of turbine and shafting for the United States Navy, has been notified by the CIO, Automobile Workers Union Local, that it will stop work and force a shutdown of the plant if 2 members of an AFL union are restored to their jobs. The CIO threat to halt work was posted on company bulletin boards by shop stewards. The AFL members are Mike Boetseff and Nicholas Imp, who complained to West Allis police last week that CIO members had surrounded Boetseff's automobile and tried to prevent them from leaving the plant. The 2 men were laid off recently after a jurisdictional dispute with the CIO. Clarion, Pennsylvania, December 29th. How the smoldering hatred of 27 years drove Frank Deerolf, 43-year-old, a garage mechanic, to steal a revolver and exact revenge of double death on the family of the man he blamed for the slaying of his father, stepmother, and stepsister was revealed tonight by Deputy Sheriff Amos Dolby. Deerolf was captured 24 hours after the slaying of Reuben Levi Wentling, 58, and the latter's son, Reuben L. Jr., age 12, at the Wentling home Friday night. Deerolf, when arraigned last night, admitted he intended to kill Wentling, but insisted the boy was shot accidentally. Wentling's wife, 51, and his daughter, Elizabeth, 22, were injured in leaping from a porch after the double killing. Dolby said the girl accused Deerolf of twice raping her, but he denied this. It was in 1913 that Deerolf's father, stepsister, and stepmother were slain. The coroner found that the elder Deerolf had killed his wife and stepdaughter and committed suicide, but Frank Deerolf accused Wentling of the triple slaying. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, December 29th. America's liquor bill was estimated today at more than $5 billion a year, not including the cost of the liquor itself. Dr. Horatio M. Pollock, mental hygiene statistician of the New York State Department of Health, told members of the symposium on alcohol conducted by the American Association for the Advancement of Science that there are at least 1 million chronic alcoholics in the United States and that the wastage of human values is chargeable to alcoholism greatly reduces the annual income of the nation and is a potent factor in keeping a large proportion of the population in a dependent or marginal economic condition. Dr. Abraham Myerson of Harvard University asserted that the problem must be met by social means, social re-education, and social legislation, but that strict prohibition is not the answer. Hey guys, if you are fascinated by the 1930s and 1940s and love this newspaper channel, maybe you would like my other channel, the World War II radio channel. There we play radio broadcasts from a specific date. I think you will enjoy that channel if you love this one, and don't forget to subscribe to it. And now for local and regional news. El Paso, Texas, December 29th. Members of the 202nd Coast Artillery Chicago National Guard Unit en route home by special train for a New Year's furlough today were ordered to return to Fort Bliss next Thursday instead of Friday as originally instructed. The commander of the 8th Corps area explained that the full regiment must be present Friday morning to begin the next phase of an intensive training program, and all troops must start the training on an equal footing. Under the original leave schedule, the guardsmen would have spent New Year's Day with their families. To get back to camp on time, they now will have to leave early on the morning of January 1st. 500 members of the regiment who went to Chicago for Christmas will be back tomorrow night. Lieutenant Colonel Fred During, formerly instructor in the Army War College in Washington, D.C., has been appointed post-executive officer at Fort Sheridan. Colonel John L. Homer, commander of the fort, announced yesterday. Lieutenant Colonel During, a graduate of the Infantry School, Chemical Warfare School, and Command and General Staff School, will be in charge of details of administration at the Army post. Libraries throughout the country are reporting a greatly increased demand for reading matter on national defense and allied subjects. Carl H. Malam, Executive Secretary of the American Library Association, reported yesterday at the association's annual midwinter conference in the Drake Hotel. The trend, Mr. Malam said, is toward books dealing with democracy, technical training, and defense industries. Atlases, maps, and globes of the world are in constant use. War's greatest threat to family life may be the fact that it causes people to lose all confidence in justice as one of the principles which regulate the course of human existence. This was the message yesterday of Dr. James H.S. Bossard of the University of Pennsylvania at the concluding session of the American Sociological Society's convention in the Congress Hotel. In peacetime, the the conception of a measurably just relation between effort and result, labor and production of labor, seems as natural to the mind of the average citizen as it is indispensable to the maintenance of the state, Dr. Bassard said. With war, this conception changes. An irritating sense of incalculable chance takes its place. Things go awry from the point of view of a reasonable casualty. Each new day may demonstrate the futility of the most careful preparations. War cancels casualty. A bill designed to outlaw labor racketeers in Illinois has been prepared for introduction in the legislature next month, it was learned yesterday. Support will be given the measure by the Illinois division of the National Small Businessmen's Association. Frederick A. Verkus, president of the Small Businessmen's Association, asserted that anyone observing the operation of labor unions must admit that many are badly governed. Labor racketeers, he said, have amassed large fortunes with money extorted alike from workers, businessmen, and the consuming public. 2 assistant state's attorneys were assigned yesterday to join in litigation which is aimed at purging Local 278 of the Bartenders Union of George B. McLean, its business agent, and its affiliation with the Nitty Gang. The defeat of McLean in the union election scheduled for January 6th is given as the primary aim of a group of petitioners whose attorney, Raymond F. Hayes, is to be heard today by Circuit Judge Robert Jerome Dunn. The election is under the control of Judge Dunn. William Crawford and Richard Gallagher, assistant state's attorneys, were instructed by state's attorney Thomas J. Courtney to be present in court and to offer their services in any manner acceptable to Judge Dunn. Hayes also is expected to ask Judge Dunn to cite McLean for contempt of court on the ground McLean's alleged dealings with the gang of Frank the Enforcer Nitty constitute a fraud on the court. McLean's charges that the Nitty Gang had seized the union led to the appointment of a receiver for the union and Nitty's subsequent trial on charges of conspiracy to take over the organization. Nitty was acquitted when McLean refused to testify against him. An estimated 4,500 members of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters and Chauffeurs elected officers yesterday under the watchful eyes of Lieutenants Thomas Kelly and Charles Egan of the state's attorney's office, 12 detectives, and a number of uniformed policemen. There was no violence. The police guard was requested by a rank-and-file group seeking to dethrone their present officers. Voting was at 220 South Ashland Avenue, and although the polls closed at 4 p.m., the last vote wasn't cast until 5:10 p.m. 5 10-man auditing teams selected outside the union ranks were still busy early this morning tabulating votes. The incumbents are headed by Frank Teat, president, who is opposed by Ray Nelson, 2410 Wellington Avenue. Nelson recently found a package of bullets on his doorstep. Dr. Otto Willemete, head of the German-American Bund in Chicago, is scheduled to appear before Municipal Judge Oscar S. Kaplan again today to testify in the tax liability suit brought by the county against the Bund and its affiliated organization, the Teutonia Publishing Company. The county seeks to collect $380 in personal property taxes for 1938 owed by the two groups. Records seized by police in the Bund's safe at 3855 Northwestern Avenue are being examined by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. 2 ex-convicts who allegedly drove off Saturday night after their car struck a young woman at Jackson Boulevard and Lotus Avenue were held by Fillmore police yesterday. They are John Passy, 24 years old, and Frank Duncan, 22, both of 301 Division Street. They were arrested by policemen William Sexton and Charles Belzer after a witness took their license number. Police said the hit-and-run car struck another near the intersection, then ran into Miss Rachel McHatton, age 17, of 5440 Gladys Avenue, breaking her leg. The car then made a U-turn and sped away. 2 red-haired colored youths were held last night by Wabash Avenue police after one was wounded during the $6 holdup of a liquor store at 5302 Indiana Avenue. As the bandits left, John Martin, 5306 Indiana Avenue Colored, a watchman, fired 2 shots, one of which took effect. James Taylor, 17 years old, was arrested after he sought treatment at Provident Hospital for a wound in his right arm. Newell Jones, age 17, of 5142 Michigan Avenue, his companion, also was arrested. Both confessed. Police are searching for a third man. Joseph Palumbo, 52 years old, 2908 Parnell Avenue, was in the Bridewell Hospital in serious condition early today after being shot in the kidney near 29th and Wallace Streets. Palumbo, a relief client, was brought to People's Hospital by his father-in-law. The latter refused to give his name, address, or any other information to Deering police. Palumbo would say only that he had been shot by a tall, short man. Tomorrow night, tell your friends and acquaintances, plain, ordinary, respectable citizens may be the most dangerous people in Chicago. You yourself may be a greater threat to the life and property of others than a criminal stalking the streets with a gun. This warning was issued yesterday by Judge John V. McCormick, who will preside in safety court January 2nd when Justice presents a bill to New Year's Eve celebrants whose automobiles have taken their annual toll on injured and killed. If you plan to drive after drinking, take a taxi, a streetcar, a bus, or an elevated train instead of your own car, said Judge McCormick. We will not be lenient in safety court. Those 10 or 20 days in jail will be a long, long time. George W. Fleming, general chairman of Mayor Kelly's Keep Chicago Safe Committee, warned pedestrians that they account for 75% of all traffic fatalities and reminded them not to stagger carelessly across streets without looking. Motorists who have had too much to drink should leave their cars where they are parked, Fleming said. Police Commissioner Allman and Captain David Flynn of the Traffic Division have promised to waive parking tickets for the sensible motorist who does not foolishly attempt to drive home. Springfield, Illinois, December 29th. A medical staff deficiency of 35% and a nursing staff shortage of 26% is revealed by a recently completed survey of Illinois' 9 hospitals for the treatment of mental cases. The deficiency varies from 9% at the Elgin Hospital to 64% at Alton. The American Psychiatric Association recommends 1 physician for every 150 patients and 1 nurse for every 8 patients. The Illinois personnel deficiencies are based on these recommendations figured against 30,000 patients. 2 reasons are given by the State Department of Welfare for the existing situation. The first is a lack of funds, and the second is lack of men having the specialized training required for certain positions on the various staffs. The department now is looking for clinical directors and pathologists for all state hospitals. Sociology belongs squarely in the field of moral theology. This is Christian sociology, and it is impossible to set up a social philosophy apart from religion and that idealism which demonstrates the individual life of man. This was the essence of an address delivered yesterday by Archbishop Samuel A. Stritch before the American Catholic Sociological Society in the Chicago Towers Club. After describing what he considered the true function of sociology, the study of man as a social being, Archbishop Stritch denounced 2 branches of modern social thinkers. There are those, he said, who pay homage to the mechanical mid-Victorian methods of science, who scoff at basic truth, who think the badge of erudition is to be a skeptic, who look upon life as merely an adventure and experimentation, and who, because they have not been able to find spiritual values in their laboratories, have taken spiritual values to be mere assumptions, mere conventions. To these thinkers, the Archbishop charged the development of the trend of absolutism. These men, he said, sometimes talk in terms of democracy, but when we read of the philosophies which go under their talking, we must stand in horror and aghast at the social spectacle which they present. They present a tyranny as terrible as any which has ever been described in the pages of history. The other thinkers he criticized were those who make everything of the creation of man's fantasy, who would have us believe there is no reality except the reality which we create in our own selves, who say there is no objectivity to truth at all. He said it is not strange that from their philosophy should come the principles of destruction and the individual exaltation of a group and individual, and the principle which makes for the destruction of all that is holy. The Christian sociologist Archbishop Stritch said studies Christian man, the Christian soul, and the interplay of social life. He ties the experience of all his notions of a right order in society to the great Christian truths. But he doesn't separate himself from progress. He realizes he is living in a changing society, and that society he holds to the one basic truth, without which there can be no right social order. We must bring Christian truths to men today in terms of their social needs and their social experiences. Hey guys, if you are fascinated by the 1930s and 1940s and love this newspaper channel, maybe you would like my other channel, the World War II radio channel. There we play radio broadcasts from a specific date. I think you will enjoy that channel if you love this one, and don't forget to subscribe to it. Los Angeles, California, December 29th. Unexpected opposition sprang up before Chicago's mighty Bears in the sunny snugness of Little Gilmore Stadium today, but in the clinches of the world champions had more than enough to close their season with a 28-14 triumph over a team of National Football League All-Stars. Spacing their touchdowns 1 1/4, the Bears went into a 7-point lead on a 78-yard march before the All-Stars had their hands on the ball in the first period. They climaxed the drive with a 58-yard combination play on which Sid Luckman passed 23 yards to Dick Plassman, and Plassman lateraled to Hampton Poole for 35. The tempo of the Bears' attack at this point aroused in the overflow crowd of 20,000, including the Stanford and Nebraska teams' Rose Bowl contestants, hopes of witnessing another 73-0 scoring jamboree such as the Chicagoans put on in Washington 3 weeks ago. But midway in the second period, the All-Stars took advantage of a bit of confusion on Bob Snyder's part to tie the score on guard Ted Livingston's 7-yard return of an intercepted pass. On this play, Snyder was driven back to his 7-yard line attempting to pass, and his first toss was slapped in the air by John Shirk, Cardinal end. Snyder regained the ball as it fell, but on a second attempted throw, the ball went into Livingston's arms. 2 plays after the ensuing kickoff, the Bears jumped back into the lead on Luckman's 59-yard pass to Harry Clark. But the champions' confidence in their own offense led to indifferent defensive play, and before the period ended, All-Stars had combined an interference penalty with 2 short passes by Sammy Baugh to Don Looney for another touchdown, sending the teams to the intermission tied at 14-14. The tie was quickly dissolved in the third quarter as quickly as the Bears were able to kick off to the All-Stars and wrest the ball from them on Luckman's interception of Ball's pass. Luckman sneaked over from the 1-foot line for the score. Thereafter, the All-Stars did not threaten, but managed to turn back 2 thrusts within their own 5-yard line before succumbing to Joe Manciacci's 4-yard plunge in the opening minutes of the fourth quarter. Coached by Ray Flattery of Washington, the All-Stars used the same defense against the Bears' man-in-motion offense that the Redskins had employed in the 73-0 playoff debacle. Their surprising strength, however, lay in the more rugged and evenly balanced personnel than the Redskins sent forth in Washington. After the Bears' opening period touchdown, the famed quick opening plays and wide full-back runs were stopped with more frequency than many of the crowd thought was in order for a World Championship 11. But even Bear power always was there, ready to explode when the Stars threatened. Pasadena, California, December 29th. Approximately 50 years of football for the University of Nebraska reached a high peak today. The Cornhusker team arrived in Pasadena for its first game on California soil and, more important, its inaugural appearance in the Rose Bowl. Hundreds of Nebraska supporters, many of whom had traveled by train, plane, and thumb from the rolling prairies to get here ahead of their idols, braved a drizzling rain to greet the Huskers. Music from the Tournament of Roses band evoked a festive air as Major Lawrence M. Biff Jones, Nebraska coach, led the Big Six Conference champions off the train. New York, December 29th. Rules experts among the nation's football coaches went into a huddle today and came up with 9 recommendations for changes in the game based on giving the offense a break. At the same time, headquarters for the Coaches Convention and the annual meeting of the National Collegiate Athletic Association buzzed with rumors linking Paul Brown, Massillon, Ohio high school coach, with the vacant Ohio State coaching berth, and Tuss McClary of Brown and Francis Schmidt, late of Ohio State, with the Dartmouth job, which Red Blake left a week ago to switch to Army. Only 2 of the changes recommended by the Coaches Rules Committee were not directly aimed at helping the offensive and thus building up spectator interest. Chief of the approved suggestions, all of which were to be presented to the NCAA Rules Committee meeting in Pine Valley, New Jersey, Wednesday, was to change the rule on a 4th down incompleted pass over the opponent's goal line. At present, such a pass is ruled a touchback and the ball is brought out to the opponent's 20-yard line where they take over with a 1st down. The coaches suggested that in the future such a pass be treated the same as if it had occurred in the field of play and not be ruled a touchback. Thus, explained Lou Little of Columbia, the committee's chairman, the ball would go to the opposing team at the point from which the pass was thrown. This will tend to improve offense because teams, once they have penetrated inside the opponent's 20-yard line, do not like to take the chance of being pushed back to that point if a pass into the end zone fails. Detroit, Michigan, December 29th. The Chicago Blackhawks closed an unhappy road trip here tonight by losing their 3rd straight National Hockey League game of the season to the Detroit Red Wings 2-1 before a near-capacity crowd of 7,679 in the Olympia Arena. The Wings failed to win 1 of their 8 games with the Hawks last year. The Hawks headed for home after the game to meet the Wings again New Year's night. The Chicagoans lost 2 and tied 1 since leaving home ice. They tied the world champion New York Rangers 3-3 and then went down to Montreal to take a 7-5 licking from the Canadiens. New York, December 29th. The Colvilles and the Patricks tonight led the New York Rangers to a 3-2 victory over the Toronto Maple Leafs in a fast National Hockey League game before 15,562 Madison Square Garden's best crowd of the season. Connie Smythe, Leafs manager, made himself automatically liable to a fine of $100 for walking out on the ice in the first period to argue over penalties after a fist fight broke out. In the fight, Phil Watson knocked down Lex Chisholm, came up with fists flying, and got in a couple of quick punches before Wally Standowski jumped at the Rangers center. New Orleans, Louisiana, December 29th. Indiana University's 13-man basketball squad arrived by plane from Los Angeles today for the Sugar Bowl game tomorrow night with the University of Kentucky and was put to bed tonight in a hotel with 5 of its members airsick. The group arrived this afternoon and was taken to watch the Sugar Bowl track meet. Shortly afterwards, some of the players complained of nausea and were sent to the hotel. Coach Branch McCracken said tonight, "I've got them all in bed. Some of the boys got pretty sick. We canceled a workout tonight and probably won't be able to work at all tomorrow. There was a storm over the mountains last night and we hit some pretty rough weather." McCracken listed Herman Schaefer, Jay McCreary, Ed Denton, Irvin Swanson, and John Logan as the most seriously affected. The 12-man Kentucky squad, led by Coach Adolph Rupp, arrived by train tonight from Lexington and had a brisk workout. And that is sports, and that is the news as read from the Chicago Tribune for Monday, December 30th, 1940. Henry Chop reporting. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and have a wonderful day.